In 1872, a museum assistant named George Smith was translating an ancient Babylonian tablet when he became so excited he began tearing off his clothes. He had just discovered a flood story, complete with a boat, a mountaintop landing, and a bird sent out to find land, written over 1,000 years before the Bible existed. Did the biblical writers simply copy an older story? The answer is more interesting than plagiarism, and it reveals something revolutionary about how ancient Israel saw the world. Right? The early chapters of Genesis, known as the primeval history, draw extensively from ancient Near Eastern mythology. Genesis 1's creation account echoes the Babylonian Enuma Elish. The Garden of Eden shares themes with the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Noah's flood, multiple Mesopotamian versions predated by centuries. This was an isolated borrowing, it was a pattern. To understand what George Smith found, we need historical context. Mesopotamia, the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern Iraq, produced flood narratives for 2,000 years before Genesis was compiled. The Sumerian Ziusudra story dates to around 2100 BCE. The Epic of Atrahasis followed around 1700 BCE. The Gilgamesh flood tablet appeared around 1200 BCE. Genesis reached its final form between 950 and 500 BCE. The biblical version came last. Now look at the structural parallels between the Sumerian Ziusudra story and the Genesis. Both begin with a divine decision to flood the earth. Both feature one chosen survivor who receives specific boat building instructions. Both specify who to bring aboard. Both describe universal destruction followed by the boat landing on a mountaintop. Both send out birds to scout for dry land. Both conclude with a sacrifice offered after emergence. 8 narrative elements, 8 perfect matches, separated by over 1,000 years. The borrowing is undeniable, but here's where it gets interesting. Watch what happens when we examine why the gods sent the flood. In the Epic of Atrahasis, the gods decide to destroy humanity because people are too noisy. Humans are keeping the gods awake. There's no moral consideration, just divine annoyance. The gods in this worldview are capricious and self-interested. They created humans as servants to do their work. When those servants become inconvenient, destruction follows. Humanity exists at the whim of irritable cosmic powers with no accountability to any principle beyond their own comfort. This was the dominant religious framework of the ancient Near East. The Israelites kept the same narrative skeleton but fundamentally changed the meaning. In Genesis, God destroys humanity because of moral corruption and violence. The flood is an act of divine justice, right? Not divine irritation. Right? God is grieved by human degradation. Right? There's emotional investment in the outcome. Right? Noah is saved because he is righteous. Right? The divine-human relationship operates on entirely different terms. Right? God establishes moral standards. Humans can choose to follow them or not. Right? Consequences flow from those choices. The universe has ethical structure. This represents ethical monotheism, belief in one God who operates according to moral principles. Place these two frameworks side by side. Right? The transformation becomes unmistakable. Right? Mesopotamian gods act from self-interest. Right? The biblical God acts from moral principle. Right? Mesopotamian humans are helpless under tyrannical divine rule. Right? Biblical humans bear responsibility for their choices. Mesopotamian floods punish inconvenience. The biblical flood punishes injustice. This wasn't just a different story, it was a critique of the dominant worldview. The Bible was saying, you think the gods are capricious tyrants? We believe the divine operates by moral principles that apply to everyone. The biblical text contains complexity. Right? Later editors with monotheistic perspectives shaped older materials, creating sometimes ambiguous, conflicted narratives. Scholars can detect these layers, different sources woven together, different theological emphasis in tension. This is why the flood story in Genesis contains apparent contradictions. 2 of each animal in one verse, 7 pairs of clean animals in another, right? Multiple traditions merged. The final product preserves traces of its compositional history. The transformation happened gradually through editing and reinterpretation. Modern readers often view the Bible as an emblem of conservatism, a text that preserves ancient traditions and resists change. In its original context, the Bible functioned as revolutionary cultural critique. The Israelites weren't preserving the dominant worldview of their time, they were transforming it. They took the stories everyone knew and rewrote them to argue for a radically different understanding of divine justice, human responsibility, and moral order. The same text that seems traditional today was subversive in its original setting. When you encounter biblical stories that seem familiar from other ancient sources, ask one question. What did they change? The changes reveal the values. The flood story's transformation from God's annoyed by noise to God grieved by evil represents nothing less than the birth of ethical monotheism, right? The shift from capricious divine power to moral divine order, the emergence of human responsibility within a universe that operates by principle rather than whim, right? The narrative structure stayed the same. The meaning became revolutionary. This pattern extends beyond the flood story. Genesis 1 transforms Babylonian creation mythology. Right? The Garden of Eden reimagines Gilgamesh's quest for immortality. Throughout the primeval history, familiar narrative structures carry transformed meanings. Right? The biblical writers weren't just storytellers. They were revolutionaries using familiar stories to argue for a different kind of world, the one where divine power answers to moral principle, where human choices matter, where justice rather than caprice governs the cosmos. They borrowed the skeleton, they transformed the soul. George Smith's excitement in 1872 was justified. He had discovered evidence of a profound cultural conversation spanning millennia. Right? The flood story wasn't copied, it was transformed, and that transformation from divine caprice to divine justice, from human helplessness to human responsibility, shaped the moral imagination of Western civilization. Right? The ancient Israelites didn't invent the flood, they reinvented what it meant. That reinvention changed everything.